Change never begins with emotion, hope, or wishful thinking. Change begins the moment a decision is made. Decisions are the invisible hinges that swing the doors of your life. Every result you experience today can be traced back to a choice you either made or avoided. When you delay decisions, you delay progress. When you avoid decisions, you surrender control. Decisive people shape their circumstances. Indecisive people are shaped by them. Life does not respond to hesitation. It responds to direction set by clear, intentional commitment and ownership taken without apology or delay today by you alone now fully awake. Most people confuse desire with decision, but desire is passive while decision is active. You can want success for years and never move an inch closer to it. A decision, however, forces alignment between thought, emotion, and behavior. It eliminates options that do not serve your future. Once you decide, your actions begin to obey your direction. Excuses lose their authority. Fear loses its vote. Decisions create momentum that emotion alone can never sustain consistently over time without discipline applied daily by focused individuals who refuse to drift back into familiar patterns again and again, endlessly, forever, unchanged, stagnant, still. Every standard you hold in life is the result of a decision you made or accepted. Standards determine what you tolerate, and what you tolerate will continue. If you decide that late starts, missed deadlines, or underperformance are acceptable, they will become normal. Raising your standards is not about perfection. It is about decision. The moment you decide what you will no longer accept, your behavior begins to change. Standards create boundaries that protect your time, energy, and future from erosion caused by low expectations and self-betrayal repeated quietly over long periods without reflection or intentional correction applied consistently. Decisions also reveal identity. You do not decide to do something until you see yourself as the type of person who does it. When you decide to grow, you are choosing a new version of yourself. That decision will challenge old habits, relationships, and beliefs that no longer fit. Discomfort is not a warning sign. It is confirmation that the decision is working. Identity shifts when decisions are honored consistently, even when no one applauds the effort or acknowledges the sacrifice required to maintain integrity during private moments of doubt, fatigue, and temptation to quit early instead of persisting forward. Indecision is not neutral. It quietly decides for you. When you refuse to choose, circumstances choose. When you delay, opportunities expire. Indecision feels safe because it avoids risk, but it creates a different risk, regret. Regret is the compound interest paid on missed decisions. Every time you wait for perfect conditions, you communicate to yourself that you do not trust your ability to adapt. Decisive people trust themselves to figure things out after they move forward, despite incomplete information and imperfect timing present in most real-life situations daily. Without advanced guarantees of success or approval from others nearby watching, decision creates focus. Once you decide, your mind stops scattering energy across too many possibilities. Focus simplifies life by reducing noise. It tells you what to say no to so you can say yes to what matters. Without decision, busyness replaces progress. You feel active without being effective. Decision restores intentional movement by creating clear priorities. It allows small daily actions to compound into significant results. Focus is not about doing more. It is about doing what aligns with the decision already made and repeating it long enough to produce measurable outcomes that reflect commitment, discipline, patience, and self-respect. Making a decision does not remove fear. It puts fear in its proper place. Fear becomes background noise instead of the director. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is obedience to decision despite fear. When you decide, you stop asking how you feel and start asking what needs to be done. Emotions become information, not instructions. This shift changes everything. Progress accelerates because action is no longer negotiable. You move forward even when confidence lags. Knowing confidence catches up to consistent action over time through experience, proof, and earned self-trust built slowly daily without external validation required. Ultimately, every breakthrough is preceded by a decision that felt uncomfortable. Growth always demands choice before results. You cannot outgrow the decisions you avoid. When you decide to take responsibility, you reclaim power. Power comes from knowing that your future is not left to chance. Each decision becomes a vote for the person you are becoming. Consistent decisions create identity. Identity shapes behavior, and behavior produces results. When you decide fully, life begins to respond with alignment, opportunity, and momentum that were always available, but required commitment to access consistently through deliberate action taken daily without hesitation, doubt, or retreat. Pressure is not the enemy most people believe it is. Pressure is a revealer. It exposes weaknesses, sharpens strengths, and forces growth that comfort never demands. When life applies pressure, it is not trying to break you, it is trying to shape you. Muscles grow by resistance, not relaxation. Skills develop through challenge, not ease. The absence of pressure produces stagnation, while sustained pressure produces progress. People who avoid pressure avoid growth without realizing it. Pressure is simply life asking you to expand beyond who you currently are and become capable of handling more responsibility, more opportunity, and more results through adaptation and effort. Most people misunderstand pressure because they associate it with pain, stress, or fear, but pressure is not punishment, it is preparation. Every meaningful outcome requires a capacity that must be built under demand. If pressure were removed, discipline would disappear, focus would weaken, and excellence would decline. Pressure forces prioritization. It demands efficiency. It pushes you to refine habits, improve systems, and eliminate waste. Without pressure, potential stays dormant. With pressure, potential is activated. The discomfort you feel is not a signal to retreat. It is evidence that growth is underway and adaptation is occurring beneath the surface, where real transformation begins before visible results ever appear. Pressure also creates urgency. And urgency produces action. When there is no pressure, procrastination thrives. Deadlines disappear, standards erode, and effort becomes optional. Pressure restores importance to what matters. It brings clarity by stripping away distractions and forcing attention onto the task at hand. Under pressure, excuses lose credibility. You stop negotiating and start executing. Pressure compresses time, which sharpens decision-making and reveals priorities. The things that truly matter rise to the surface, while trivial concerns fade. Pressure turns vague intentions into specific actions by demanding response instead of reflection alone, movement instead of contemplation, execution instead of endless planning and overthinking. The difference between people who grow and people who remain stuck is not talent, intelligence, or opportunity, but their relationship with pressure. Some resist it, others lean into it. Those who resist pressure seek comfort and familiarity, even when it limits them. Those who embrace pressure see it as a tool for expansion. They understand that avoiding pressure delays progress. Growth requires weight, resistance, and challenge. When you choose pressure intentionally through discipline, high standards, and consistent effort, you gain control over your development instead of leaving it to random external forces. Self-imposed pressure builds strength without chaos and creates progress without crisis or collapse. Pressure builds capacity. Capacity is your ability to handle more without breaking. More responsibility, more complexity, more demand. Capacity does not increase through theory, it increases through load. When pressure increases gradually and consistently, you adapt. What once felt overwhelming becomes manageable. What once required effort becomes routine. This is how growth compounds. Pressure stretches your limits, and once stretched, they rarely return to their original size. You become someone who can operate at a higher level with less stress. Capacity turns pressure from a threat into a familiar environment where performance becomes sustainable instead of exhausting, and resilience replaces fragility over time through repeated exposure and recovery cycles. Avoiding pressure often feels wise in the short term, but it creates vulnerability long term. Comfort weakens resilience. When pressure inevitably arrives, those who have avoided it are unprepared. They crumble under demands they never trained for. Pressure training builds emotional strength, mental endurance, and practical competence. It teaches problem solving under stress. It develops confidence rooted in experience, not optimism. When you have endured pressure before, future challenges lose their power to intimidate. You trust your ability to adapt. Pressure becomes familiar territory rather than unknown danger. Familiarity reduces fear, and reduced fear increases performance under demanding conditions where others freeze, panic, or retreat from responsibility and accountability. Pressure also refines character. Under pressure, values are tested, not discussed. Integrity, discipline, patience, and persistence are revealed when conditions are difficult. Anyone can appear committed when circumstances are easy. Pressure reveals who you are when results are slow and effort is required. It exposes inconsistencies between what you say and what you do. This exposure is valuable because it provides feedback. Pressure shows where alignment is needed. It invites correction, improvement, and growth at the character level, not just performance. Character strengthened under pressure creates stability, allowing success to be sustained rather than temporary, flashy, or dependent on perfect conditions that rarely last in real-life situations. Choosing pressure intentionally shifts you from reaction to creation. Instead of waiting for life to apply pressure through crisis, you apply it through structure, discipline, and higher standards. You set challenging goals. You demand consistency from yourself. You operate with urgency before circumstances force it. This type of pressure is empowering because it is controlled. It builds momentum without chaos. Over time, pressure becomes less about survival and more about mastery. You learn to function effectively in demanding environments. Pressure stops being something you endure and becomes something you use. It becomes a tool that sharpens focus, strengthens resolve, and expands what you believe you are capable of handling day after day without needing external force to push you forward. Clarity is not something you wait for. It is something you earn through movement. Most people believe they need certainty before they take action, but certainty is the reward of action, not the prerequisite. When you stand still, your mind fills the gap with doubt, fear, and overthinking. Action interrupts confusion. The moment you move, information appears. Feedback shows up. Reality responds. Clarity is formed by engaging with the process, not imagining it. Thinking alone creates assumptions, but action produces evidence. Evidence replaces doubt with understanding and transforms vague ideas into concrete direction, shaped by real experience instead of speculation. Confidence works the same way. Confidence is not a personality trait. It is a byproduct of keeping promises to yourself. Every small action you take and complete builds trust within you. Every avoided action erodes it. Waiting to feel confident before acting reverses the natural order. Confidence follows execution. When you act despite uncertainty, you prove to yourself that you are capable of handling discomfort. That proof compounds. Over time, confidence becomes stable because it is rooted in lived experience, not motivational emotion. You stop needing external validation because internal evidence confirms your ability to figure things out as you go rather than needing perfect conditions. Action also simplifies complexity. When you think too long, everything feels overwhelming. When you act, a problem breaks into manageable pieces. Movement forces prioritization. It reveals what matters now instead of what might matter later. Many concerns disappear once action begins because they were never real problems, only imagined obstacles. Action exposes what requires adjustment and what requires persistence. This practical feedback cannot be accessed through contemplation. Action turns confusion into clarity by narrowing focus to the next step. One step creates momentum. Momentum reduces resistance. Reduced resistance makes continued action easier, even when the path ahead remains partially unclear and imperfect by nature in most meaningful pursuits. Fear thrives in inactivity. When nothing is happening, fear grows unchecked. It invents outcomes and exaggerates risk. Action shrinks fear by confronting it with reality. Most fears dissolve once tested. Others become manageable once defined. Action gives fear boundaries. Instead of being a vague force, fear becomes a specific challenge. Specific challenges can be solved. Action replaces emotional narratives with practical data. You stop asking what if and start asking what now. This shift grounds you in the present. Confidence grows when you realize fear does not disappear before action, but diminishes because of action taken consistently despite uncertainty and internal resistance that naturally arises when stepping beyond familiar limits. Clarity is dynamic, not static. It evolves as you move. What was unclear yesterday becomes obvious after engagement. New questions replace old ones. This is progress. Waiting for full clarity assumes life is predictable, but growth is nonlinear. You learn by doing, adjusting, and refining. Each action reveals more information. Each attempt sharpens understanding. Clarity is built layer by layer. Those who act accept that mistakes are part of the process. Mistakes are not failures, they are data points. They inform the next move. Action-oriented people treat missteps as instruction, not condemnation, allowing clarity to deepen through experience rather than erode through self-judgment and hesitation. Confidence accelerates when action becomes habitual. When you act daily, discipline replaces motivation. You no longer rely on feeling ready. You rely on routine. Routine removes emotional negotiation. Action becomes normal instead of heroic. This consistency builds identity. You begin to see yourself as someone who moves forward regardless of mood. Identity anchored in action creates resilient confidence. It does not spike and crash based on results. It remains steady because it is tied to behavior, not outcomes. You trust yourself because you know you will show up again tomorrow, even if today was imperfect, unproductive, or uncomfortable in ways you did not anticipate initially. Inaction preserves comfort but sacrifices growth. Action disrupts comfort but produces expansion. Every meaningful skill, relationship, or achievement exists on the other side of action. Waiting keeps life theoretical. Acting makes it tangible. Confidence increases when life becomes something you participate in, not observe. Clarity sharpens when you engage directly instead of analyzing from a distance. Participation creates ownership. Ownership creates responsibility. Responsibility strengthens self-belief. You stop seeing yourself as someone waiting for opportunity and start seeing yourself as someone who creates it through consistent movement. Action shifts your role from passive observer to active participant in shaping outcomes that once felt distant or reserved for others who seemed more prepared or confident than you believed yourself to be. Action also builds tolerance for uncertainty. When you act often, uncertainty becomes familiar. Familiarity reduces fear. You learn that you do not need all the answers to begin. You only need the next step. Over time, your ability to operate without certainty becomes a strength. You remain effective in ambiguity. This is rare and valuable. Many freeze without guarantees. Those who act thrive without them. Confidence becomes adaptability. Clarity becomes direction rather than detail. You move forward guided by principles instead of perfect plans. Action trains you to trust the process of learning while moving, adjusting, and refining as new information emerges through experience rather than waiting for complete understanding before beginning. Comfort feels harmless, but it quietly erodes ambition. When comfort becomes the goal, growth becomes optional. The mind begins to prioritize ease over progress, familiarity over expansion. Comfort encourages routines that require little effort and even less thought. Over time, this dulls awareness and lowers expectations. You stop questioning what is possible and start defending what is familiar. Comfort convinces you that stability is success, even when nothing is improving. It creates a false sense of safety while slowly shrinking your capacity. Progress demands disruption, and comfort resists disruption at every turn by making stagnation feel acceptable and normal over long periods of time without obvious warning signs. Comfort delays action by making tomorrow feel safer than today. When you are comfortable, urgency disappears. There is no immediate consequence for inaction, so delay feels justified. But delay compounds quietly. Opportunities pass unnoticed. Skills remain undeveloped. Momentum never starts. Comfort numbs the discomfort that would otherwise push you forward. It sedates ambition. You tell yourself you will act when conditions improve, but comfort ensures conditions never change. This creates a cycle where preparation replaces execution and intention replaces effort. Comfort rewards patience without progress, making it difficult to distinguish between rest and avoidance. Over time, this distinction fades, and avoidance becomes habitual while potential remains unrealized. Comfort also distorts risk perception. It exaggerates the danger of change while minimizing the cost of staying the same. You begin to fear loss more than stagnation, even though stagnation is the greater loss. Comfort tells you that trying and failing is worse than never trying at all. This mindset protects the ego but limits growth. Growth requires exposure to uncertainty, and comfort shields you from it. Shielding feels wise but weakens resilience. When you avoid discomfort, you avoid learning how to recover from it. This leaves you fragile. Comfort makes you feel strong until challenge arrives, and when it does, the lack of preparation becomes painfully clear through overwhelm, doubt, and retreat from responsibility. Progress requires discomfort because discomfort signals expansion. When something feels uncomfortable, it often means you are stretching beyond what you have mastered. Learning feels uncomfortable. Discipline feels uncomfortable. Change feels uncomfortable. These sensations are not warnings, they are indicators. Comfort eliminates these signals by keeping you within familiar limits. Without discomfort, feedback disappears. You cannot tell whether you are growing because nothing challenges you. Discomfort provides contrast. It shows you where effort is needed. Avoiding it keeps you blind to your own edges. Progress happens at the boundary of capability, not within the center of ease. Comfort keeps you inside the boundary, safe but unchanged. Repeating patterns that produce predictable outcomes you already know too well. Comfort also affects identity. Over time, you begin to see yourself as someone who prefers ease. This identity reinforces behavior. You choose options that protect comfort rather than challenge it. You explain away ambition as unrealistic or unnecessary. You surround yourself with environments and people that validate staying the same. Growth-oriented identities are built through repeated discomfort. Each time you do something difficult, you expand how you see yourself. Comfort prevents these identity upgrades. It locks you into an older version of yourself. Identity stagnation leads to dissatisfaction because internally you sense there is more, but externally you continue to choose less effort, less risk, and fewer demands from yourself. The cost of comfort is often invisible at first. There is no immediate penalty. Life continues. Bills get paid. Routines function. This is why comfort is dangerous. It hides its consequences. But over time, the gap between who you are and who you could be grows wider. This gap creates frustration, restlessness, and regret. You may not know exactly what is wrong, only that something feels off. That feeling comes from unused capacity. Comfort wastes capacity. It leaves talent undeveloped and potential idle. The pain of discomfort is immediate but temporary. The pain of comfort is delayed but cumulative, growing heavier each year as opportunities diminish and time becomes more valuable. Company. Effort also weakens discipline. Discipline thrives on challenge. When life is too easy, discipline atrophies. You lose the ability to do what is necessary when it is inconvenient. Small discomforts begin to feel overwhelming. This makes future challenges harder than they need to be. Comfort conditions you to expect ease, so when difficulty appears, it feels unfair. Growth-oriented people expect difficulty. They see it as part of the process. Comfort-oriented people resist it. This resistance drains energy and focus. Discipline, built through discomfort, creates confidence. Discipline, avoided through comfort, creates dependence on motivation, which is unreliable. When motivation fades, comfort offers an easy exit and progress stalls once again. Choosing discomfort intentionally reverses the effects of comfort. When you seek challenge, you regain control over your development. You stop waiting for life to force growth through crisis. You apply pressure voluntarily. This builds strength without chaos. Discomfort chosen is empowering. It reminds you that you are capable of effort. It restores urgency. It sharpens focus. Each act of intentional discomfort trains you to tolerate more. Over time, what once felt difficult becomes normal. This expands your comfort zone instead of shrinking it. Progress accelerates because you are no longer negotiating with ease. You move forward because growth has become more important than comfort, and effort is no longer viewed as a threat, but as a requirement for becoming more. Comfort promises peace but delivers stagnation. Growth demands effort but delivers expansion. Every meaningful outcome requires a willingness to be uncomfortable for longer than most people are willing to tolerate. Comfort asks you to settle. Growth asks you to stretch. The choice is subtle but decisive. Each day you either protect comfort or pursue progress. That choice compounds. Comfort makes days easier and years harder. Discomfort makes days harder and years easier. The direction you move is determined by which one you prioritize consistently through daily decisions that seem small but shape your future more than dramatic moments ever could. Personal responsibility begins with ownership. Ownership means recognizing that your current results are connected to your past choices, whether intentional or not. This awareness is uncomfortable because it removes the option to blame circumstances, people, or timing. But it is also empowering because it returns control to you. When you accept responsibility, you stop waiting for permission to change. You stop explaining your position and start evaluating your actions. Responsibility shifts your focus from what happened to what can be done next. It forces honesty. Without honesty, growth is impossible. Responsibility is not about guilt. It is about clarity, and clarity creates direction for meaningful improvement. Avoiding responsibility feels protective, but it is limiting. Blame creates temporary emotional relief while quietly reinforcing powerlessness. When you blame external factors, you give them control over your future. Responsibility does the opposite. It says your response matters more than the situation. This mindset creates resilience. You stop asking who is at fault and start asking what is required. That question leads to solutions instead of excuses. Responsibility removes the elusive on that someone else will fix things. It trains you to look inward for answers and outward for opportunity. This shift in perspective changes how you approach challenges, transforming obstacles into problems to solve rather than burdens to endure passively. Responsibility also sharpens decision-making. When you know you are accountable for outcomes, you think differently before you act. You consider long-term consequences instead of short-term comfort. Responsibility discourages impulsive choices and encourages intentional ones. It raises your standards. You stop accepting poor results as normal because you understand they reflect your input. This awareness increases discipline. Discipline is easier to maintain when you see a direct connection between effort and outcome. Responsibility strengthens this connection. It eliminates the illusion that success is random. You begin to see patterns. Patterns can be adjusted. Responsibility gives you the leverage to make those adjustments deliberately instead of reacting emotionally when things do not go as planned. Taking responsibility changes how you interpret failure. Failure stops being an indictment and becomes information. Instead of asking why it happened to you, you ask what you can learn from it. This keeps momentum alive. People who avoid responsibility often stop after setbacks because they see failure as proof of limitation. Responsible individuals see failure as feedback. Feedback guides improvement. This mindset keeps you engaged in the process longer. Responsibility allows you to separate self-worth from outcomes. You are not your results, but your results are influenced by your behavior. This distinction allows you to critique actions without attacking identity, creating a healthier and more productive relationship with growth. Responsibility also impacts how others perceive and interact with you. People trust those who take responsibility. Accountability signals reliability. When you own mistakes, you build credibility. When you deflect blame, you erode it. Responsibility attracts opportunity because it reduces risk for others. Leaders are given responsibility because they demonstrate ownership. Ownership creates confidence in your ability to handle pressure. Even in personal relationships, responsibility builds respect. It shows maturity. It shows self-awareness. It communicates that you are not fragile. This reputation compounds. Over time, being known as someone who takes responsibility opens doors that remain closed to those who constantly explain why things are not their fault. Personal responsibility also eliminates entitlement. Entitlement expects reward without effort. Responsibility understands that outcomes are earned. This distinction is critical for growth. Entitlement creates frustration because expectations exceed effort. Responsibility aligns expectations with behavior. When you expect less and do more, progress accelerates. Responsibility encourages patience because you understand that results follow consistency. It reduces resentment because you no longer compare yourself to others unfairly. You focus on your lane. You measure progress against your own standards. This creates internal stability. You stop oscillating emotionally based on external validation. Responsibility grounds you. It makes success repeatable because it is built on controllable actions rather than unpredictable recognition or approval. Responsibility requires courage because it removes excuses. Excuses protect comfort but prevent change. Responsibility demands that you face uncomfortable truths about your habits, priorities, and effort. This confrontation can feel threatening to the ego, but growth requires ego reduction. When you accept responsibility, you admit that improvement is possible. This is hopeful, not condemning. Responsibility assumes capacity. It says you are capable of more. It challenges you to rise to that capacity. Avoiding responsibility keeps you small by pretending limits are fixed. Responsibility expands you by insisting limits are flexible. This belief changes how you approach effort. You push longer, try again, and stay engaged instead of retreating at the first sign of difficulty. Responsibility also creates consistency. When you stop blaming mood, motivation, or circumstance, you act regardless of how you feel. This builds reliability within yourself. You trust your follow-through. Self-trust is powerful. It reduces internal conflict because decisions are honored. Responsibility removes the need for constant motivation. You move because you decided to. Over time, this consistency shapes identity. You become someone who does what is required. This identity simplifies life. Fewer internal debates, fewer justifications, more execution. Responsibility becomes a stabilizing force that supports long-term progress. It anchors behavior in principle rather than emotion, allowing growth to continue even when enthusiasm fades or external support disappears. Standards determine outcomes long before results appear. The level you tolerate becomes the level you live. When standards are low, effort becomes optional and mediocrity feels justified. Raising standards is not about demanding perfection. It is about refusing to accept less than your capacity. The moment you elevate what you expect from yourself, behavior must change to match. Standards act like an internal compass. They guide decisions when motivation fades. Without high standards, talent drifts and discipline weakens. With high standards, actions align with long-term goals instead of short-term comfort. Standards create consistency because they define what is acceptable regardless of mood, environment, or external pressure. Execution is where standards are proven. It is easy to claim high expectations, but execution reveals what you truly value. Execution requires translating intention into behavior repeatedly. It demands focus, follow-through, and discipline. Ideas without execution are harmless fantasies. Execution turns vision into reality through applied effort. High standards without execution create frustration. Execution without standards creates chaos. Together, they create progress. Execution is often uncomfortable because it exposes gaps between intention and action. This exposure is valuable. It shows where growth is needed. Execution forces alignment. You either rise to the standard or confront the truth that the standard must be honored through greater effort and consistency than before. Raising standards begins internally. You decide how you show up before anyone else notices. Internal standards govern preparation, effort, and integrity. When no one is watching, standards are tested. This is where execution is formed. External accountability helps, but internal accountability sustains. When you hold yourself to a higher level privately, public results follow naturally. Internal standards remove the need for constant supervision. You become self-governed. This creates efficiency and trust. You stop negotiating with yourself. Execution becomes non-negotiable because your identity is tied to honoring your word. This internal alignment simplifies decisions and strengthens discipline over time through repetition. Execution thrives on clarity. Clear standards define what needs to be done, how well it must be done. Vague standards produce vague effort. Clear expectations eliminate confusion. You know what success looks like. This allows focused execution. Clarity reduces procrastination because the next step is obvious. Execution then becomes a matter of doing, not deciding. High performers reduce friction by defining standards in advance. This pre-commitment removes emotional debate. When standards are clear, excuses lose power. You act because the requirement is already established. Execution becomes habitual instead of heroic. Small, consistent actions compound when guided by clear standards and sustained effort applied daily without emotional interference. Raising standards often requires letting go of excuses. Excuses protect comfort, but undermine execution. When standards rise, excuses must fall. This is uncomfortable because excuses often feel justified, but justification does not produce results. Execution requires responsibility. It asks what needs to be done regardless of how you feel. Standards create pressure to act in alignment with your goals. This pressure is productive. It narrows focus and sharpens priorities. You stop doing what is easy and start doing what is necessary. Execution under higher standards builds confidence because it proves capability. Each time you meet the standards, self-respect grows. This self-respect reinforces future execution. Consistency is the bridge between standards and results. One strong effort does not reflect a standard. Repeated behavior does. Standards are revealed over time through consistency. Execution must be sustained. This is where many fall short. They raise standards briefly, then retreat when effort feels demanding. True standards endure discomfort. Consistency requires systems, not willpower. Systems support execution when motivation fades. High standards encourage system building because they demand reliability. Execution supported by systems becomes predictable. Predictability produces results. Results reinforce BELI, EF. This cycle strengthens discipline. Over time, what once required effort becomes routine. The standard becomes normal. Execution becomes automatic. Growth accelerates because energy is no longer wasted on starting and stopping repeatedly. Raising standards also means increasing expectations for outcomes. You stop aiming to survive and start aiming to perform. This shift changes how you approach tasks. You prepare more thoroughly. You refine skills. You seek feedback. Execution becomes intentional. High standards invite evaluation. You measure results honestly. This honesty allows improvement. You stop hiding behind effort alone and focus on effectiveness. Execution guided by outcome-based standards produces leverage. You learn what works and eliminate what does not. This creates efficiency. Efficiency frees resources for greater challenges. Each level of execution prepares you for the next. Standards pull you forward by demanding more precision, more focus, and more commitment than before. Execution is ultimately a reflection of identity. You execute in alignment with who you believe you are. Raising standards reshapes identity. You begin to see yourself as someone who follows through, who finishes, who delivers. This identity drives behavior. Execution becomes an expression of self-concept. When identity and standards align, effort feels purposeful. You no longer need external pressure. Internal expectation is enough. Execution becomes self-reinforcing. Each completed action strengthens belief. Belief strengthens execution. This loop creates momentum. Momentum makes growth feel natural rather than forced. Over time, high standards and consistent execution create a reputation with yourself that becomes unshakable and self-sustaining through discipline, clarity, and repeated proof of capability.